Pastor Matt Nichols, how long have you owned Soul Harvest Church for?
Well, I don't own it. It's a nonprofit, so I can't
Alrighty.
own it.
Mhm.
But I'm the pastor here,
Alrighty.
and we started it from nothing almost 23 years ago.
Alrighty.
Yes.
That's awesome. So, before we get into that, let's go way back to the beginning. How did you start knowing, all right, I want to be a pastor?
Sure. If you look right above your head there, Landon, there's a thing that's hanging on the wall. It says, I wrote this 45 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
So I was just a kid in elementary school, and the teacher asked us to write down what we wanted to be when we grow up. And right behind your head is my paper, and it says, when I grow up, I'm going to be a minister. And there's some misspellings on there.
Yeah, of course.
But I've always known, even when I was a child,
mm-hmm.
and then my mom saved that paper, and then when I graduated from Pastoral Training College,
mm-hmm.
She had that framed, and it's been in my office ever since. But I knew as a child,
mm-hmm.
but I walked away from it a little bit as a teenager, kind of got a big head from playing basketball and those type of things. I was pursuing law and politics, but it happens over time. Especially with more of a calling to what we would call ministry, you have to know in your heart, and it's just a heavenly calling that you
mm-hmm.
feel, you embrace, and it just doesn't go. It's like a soft whisper that never goes away.
Of course. So you kind of always knew that you wanted to be a pastor.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
So going along that path, what are some challenges that you faced along the way?
Well, a lot.
mm-hmm.
You're dealing with people all the time, and I'll give you one example, Landon. In our church, for instance, we have young people like yourself.
mm-hmm.
You see that we're a thriving young church.
Absolutely.
But we also have a lot of senior citizens who are in their 80s and late
mm-hmm.
70s, and every generation in between. And so as a pastor, you're dealing with people from every generation, every walk of life. You're dealing with people of every economic level, of every race, and you have to be skilled and trained in a way that your ministry touches every single person. We have people in our church, Landon, that grew up and they did not have indoor plumbing.
Mm-hmm.
They had to go outside to an outhouse to go to the bathroom. They had to take a bath. They literally had a big tub that they would fill outside.
Wow.
And so I've got to take people like that, and then I've got people like you who've
mm-hmm.
had an iPhone ever since you can remember.
Yeah.
And so two totally different viewpoints of life. And yet you have to connect all that together. That's one of the many challenges that we have. Another challenge would be we don't get any funding, so all of our donations are completely voluntary. So, there's our vision and our heart is always bigger than our budget. So we have to make priorities and,
mm-hmm.
I'd love to, right over there, right behind my office door there, we have planned to build a big youth center. A gymnasium and playground for kids and classroom, just all sorts of stuff for kids.
That's awesome.
But it just takes money,
mm-hmm.
And so one of the challenges we all face is money.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Speaking of that aspect of the money thing, I hear people all the time talk about the fact that, some churches are in it for money. Some churches are just doing it just so they can get paid at the end of the day.
Sure.
But like you said, it's a nonprofit organization,
sure.
nonprofit church.
Sure.
So how do you handle and balance all that at the same time?
Sure. The great word you just said was the word balance.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the things that, and there's so many churches and they have different perspectives on this, so I can't speak for everybody, but
yep.
My wife and I, when we started this church, there were no people, there was no money. Mm-hmm. We funded it completely out of our own pockets for the first 5 years. And I did not take any form of income until just a few years ago. And then because we would just reinvest.
Yeah.
And I think Sure, are there people that maybe their motives get off and that type of thing? Sure, but usually that's the exception and not the rule. Most pastors, most ministers are ministering like myself at a sacrifice to their own family, to be able to have the privilege to do what we do.
Mm-hmm.
But a common saying we would say, Landon, is ministers are not in it for the income.
Yep.
We're in it for the outcome.
Absolutely.
It's about it, sowing into people's lives and,
Mm-hmm.
and seeing whether you want to use the word like positivity, another word would be discipleship, people growing, marriages being saved, young people discovering purpose and destiny. And as you've seen, and even in our youth group, we've had hundreds of young people come away from things like suicide,
Absolutely.
from drugs, from very self-harming behavior. And we're seeing, what a lot of people would call a revival, if you
Mm-hmm.
will. But that's why we do this. That's why,
Absolutely.
myself and like Steve, who's our youth minister, and very well, Steve doesn't get any money from this.
Mm-hmm.
He sows thousands and thousands of his own money into our youth group to be able to do what he does. And so 99% of us are in it not for the income.
Yeah.
But I would say, since this is a JAG project, and if there is anybody saying, hey, well, I don't want to be in the ministry because I don't want to be poor, I would just say, God always takes care of his people, one way, shape, or form. God
Mm-hmm.
always provides. There were times in my earlier life, and I hope I'm not talking too much.
No, you're perfectly fine.
Okay.
Perfectly fine.
But, when we were younger and things were tough, I mean, this is all we could do to put shoes on our kids.
Yeah.
Both my older kids graduated from Cloverdale, and I made a terrible mistake. One year we were poor, and it was all I could do to afford shoes for my kids, and
Yep.
and I bought a pair of tennis shoes for my son that were not a cool brand like Nike or Adidas. They were a non-cool brand, and not only did I buy them an off-brand, I bought them an inch too big so that he could grow into them.
Yeah.
And he went to school looking like a dork. I mean, his shoes were way too big for him, and they were this bright white, just screaming, this is not a cool shoe.
Mm-hmm.
And all of his friends are wearing Air Jordans and, the cool stuff. And looking back, I wish I had did whatever it took, whether it was to get a second job or a third job, because I had two jobs
Mm-hmm.
a lot of times, to make sure that I didn't do that. But yeah,
Mm-hmm.
most ministers are living very sacrificially. Yeah.
And I'm gonna go and use that as you talked about the fact that if you would have gone back, if you could go back, you'd get a second job, or there's things you would do. In life, even in Christianity as well, along with it, there's moments where like you make regrets, and I know
Sure.
everybody can agree with me when I say that you're gonna make
Sure.
regrets, and just you want to go back and you're gonna change it. But of course, life you can't go back and you can't change those.
Right.
What are some opportunities that you can use to kind of use as a learning point, as per
Sure.
se?
One thing that I've actually apologized to my children for in my congregation, looking back with regret, is I at times did not stick up for my children enough.
Mm-hmm.
I worked so hard trying to build this church and to help others. Sometimes when there was conflict in some way, shape, or form, I did not stick up for my kids like I should have.
Yeah.
And I've let them know profusely. I wish I could go back and redo that.
Mm-hmm.
And that goes along with if anybody was out there looking and saying, "Hey, I'm thinking about becoming a pastor."
Yeah.
There are some sacrifices that you make, for sure. And there's a sacrifice in every career. I mean, I've owned my own business.
Mm-hmm.
I had an asphalt business for several years, and there are sacrifices in that. No matter what you do in life, there's going to be sacrifices for achievement. That's just how it goes. But some other regrets, not too many. I think if anything, I regret the times I did not operate in confidence.
Yeah.
I guess I realize now, Landon, that I've been doing this for almost 30 years next week, as how long I've been a pastor. And
That's awesome.
Earlier in my ministry, I did not display as much confidence as I should have. And I wanted to be humble, and I wanted to be honoring of people that were older than me and that type of thing.
Yeah.
But there were times when I was right about something and I didn't stick to it as much as I should have. And I would say to anybody who's watching this, when you know you're right, or when you know you've got a cause that you believe in, don't back down. Don't be timid about it. Be bold as a lion. Yeah.
One thing I do want to touch base on is another big thing with this church specifically is not only you have all these situations of people to get involved. Like, I mean, I see volunteers all the time, whether that's in a young adult group, whether that's in youth ministry, the kids' church, any of that, even in the church. I mean, there's always places to volunteer, and people are just biting at the nip here to volunteer.
Sure.
I mean, you're not always going to see those places where, I mean, sometimes you're really begging for volunteers, of course. Here, it's not as, at least in my opinion, not as big as an issue as you would see. What are some ways that you've kind of gotten people to help, or is it more of a fact that maybe just people see it, there's good in this church, and people kind of hear a calling and they're kind of come help out?
You said a very good word there. You said people see it. And so one of the things that we're very good at here is casting vision. We have to give people a vision. This is what we're doing. This is why we're doing it. And then we give a vision that makes people want to be involved. But the other thing that we're good at is we make clear steps for people to get involved and make it easy for people to get involved. And most people, I don't know if you've ever heard this saying, how do you eat an elephant? One bite at a time. And so what a visionary has to do is I see the big picture. I see the elephant.
Yeah.
Most people can't see the elephant. So what I got to do is I got to make it in bite-sized pieces.
Yeah.
And so that, well, I can't see the elephant, but I can see that.
Yep.
And so one of the things we do with getting people involved is we have a clear vision, we make the process easy, and then we make it where you're not committing to go to Africa necessarily. We make it where it's a doable commitment. Does that make sense? So that's one of the ways we get people involved. And then I think people see our success. And I don't like to use the word success. Maybe that's not a good word, but I don't know. We're doing a good job, and people see that, and people want to be associated and involved with things that are winning. And so I think that helps as well.
In my eyes, I definitely think that you could say as a successful church for sure. I mean, we're saving a bunch. You guys are saving a bunch of adults, saving a bunch of teens. I mean, heck, we just made the 150 mark in 1 year, and we surpassed that by a couple more on top of that.
Yeah.
I mean, you guys are changing lives. I mean, you're going out to Brazil. Like, we have a team in Brazil. I know right now. You go out to all these places all the time. I mean, just changing lives, especially for the better, bringing them to Christ. I mean, how does that make you feel, knowing that you're able to do that for people?
Well, very good. And I want to say this, Landon. We had this vision in our hearts all 30 years I've been in the ministry.
Yep.
But the first several years, it was brutal. I mean, there was just nobody coming to our church, and yet we had this vision. So I would say to anybody watching this, dream the big dream. Have it in your heart to do these amazing things, but just recognize they're not going to come overnight. And even, just you said, do you feel good that you're having such an impact? Well, of course we do. But I can tell you it feels good now because we were willing to pay a price and not quit when it didn't feel good.
Yeah. Because
there was a time, I preached to empty pews for about 5 years with hardly either nobody coming or just a handful of people. And that didn't feel good. Yeah. And so we have this today because we were willing to hang in there and not quit. And I think just with no matter what somebody's doing, if they're wanting to be an attorney, if they're wanting to be a mechanic, fly an airplane, whatever it is, anything worth doing is going to have resistance. Having a marriage and children in your future, that's a wonderful endeavor. But no matter what endeavor you have, there's going to be resistance.
Yep.
But when you overcome that resistance in career, in family, and just your achievements, your personal goals, then that's when the victory is. That's when it's the eating apple pie. That's when it's fun. Yeah. And so we're experiencing today. It is a lot of fun. And when I walk down the hallways at a school function, and to see all these kids coming up to me and hey, Pastor Matt, and I know we've had an impact in their life. I just feel so wonderful inside, and that's greater than any income, than any award you could put on my desk. To me, change lives, especially of young people, are just some of the most proudest fruit that I have in my life.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I noticed you used the word overcome there.
Yeah.
Knowing from the fact that you've overcome many challenges, of course, like
Sure.
you said, you started off as a smaller church and then just not getting many people to come.
Sure.
And then you overcame challenges, expanded out, and then you've gotten to, what's the current number that you've saved on your trips right now?
We're over 1 million souls that have filled out decision cards for Christ in my mission trips. Yes,
absolutely. And I mean, knowing it's challenges, and like you said, you've decided to stay with it and decided to keep going and keep pushing, and then you've doing amazing things for amazing people that maybe didn't start in the best path, or maybe didn't think that they would be able to do this.
Yeah,
like I've heard you say before, just because you haven't started the right way, you can always overcome, like the words you said, and then become a great person, become a believer in Christ, become a person that walks with Christ.
Yeah, that and of course we're talking more in a church setting. Mm-hmm. And yes, there's it's never too late for anybody to turn their life around. If they're breathing, if they're on this side of the dirt, there's hope, there's purpose for every single person. Mm-hmm. But I'd also say, because I know this is a JAG class and we're also looking at careers and that type of thing, correct? I would just say, I think every kid should have a dream.
Absolutely.
And I think every kid needs to be thinking about, man, what is my life going to look like when I'm 30 or when I'm 25 or even 40? And you have to picture in your mind what that looks like. And then you have to begin to walk it backwards and say, okay, if I want to be at this point when I'm 30, what do I have to do when I'm 19? When I'm graduating high school, like you're going to Ball State next year, correct? And so I would challenge anybody who's listening to this, take some serious reflection. What does my life look like at age 30? And most people tell me, I want to be married, I want to have kids, I want to have a good job, I want to have a nice car, live in a nice house. Mm-hmm. And then I usually ask some difficult questions like, well, how much money is it going to take to do that? Mm-hmm. And then we begin to think about it, and they say, well, about this much. And I say, well, what kind of careers make that kind of money? And then they begin to think about it. And it's just a good exercise to start thinking ahead. What do I want to be at age 30? And how can I get there at age 16 or age 15? How does what I do at age 15 impact what my life will look like when I'm 30? And what I would tell people is it does have an impact. Mm-hmm. The decisions you make today have an impact for 10, 20, 30 years from now, or a whole lifetime.
Now, going in this today, looking at the camera, what is one message that you want to leave to anyone and everyone watching that you believe that they really have to know?
Well, to sum it in one message, Landon, that would be tough. Can I do two? I'll do one secular and one for the church. How about that?
Absolutely, go ahead.
For the secular, for everybody who's out there, you're in JAG class, you're in business class, whatever class you're in, the message I would have for you is there's no easy ride in life. You're going to have obstacles and adversities. And just because you have obstacles and adversities, that doesn't mean you're a failure. That is part of the human experience. And one of the greatest things I can tell you is to have tenacity and don't quit, don't back up. Have a heart that overcomes challenges. Anything worth doing is going to have challenges. And you may have even started on the wrong side of the tracks. Maybe you started off and you were born into poverty like I was. Maybe you feel like you were born the wrong color, or because maybe you've been a victim of racism. Maybe you've been a victim of something of another kind, some type of bullying. I would say this: you can overcome every single obstacle in this world if you just don't quit. And from a spiritual perspective, of course, I do believe, my goodness gracious, that if you're alive, you have purpose and destiny and gifting. And there is a creator who loves you very much and wants to know you on a personal level. And if you're skeptical about that, and you should be skeptical, you don't want to just believe anybody that comes along saying anything or anything you read on the internet. But one of the greatest things you can do, especially if you're skeptical, is pray, Lord, if you're real, show me. And then be open and watch and be amazed, because he absolutely will. There you go.
Thank you, Pastor Matt. This has been Human Library with Pastor Matt Nichols. I want to thank you, Pastor Matt. Thank you for doing this. We appreciate you very much. And just keep doing what you love. Keep changing people's lives.
Thank you, Landon. And thank you for your interview skills.
Of course,
Excellent
of course.
job.
Thank you.
All right.